Kai, I know you're extremely busy. There's so much happening, and super nice to have you and speak for a couple of minutes about all the stuff that is happening around AI, language models, and obviously the developments in Brussels that you're so involved in. These are events that not only you are involved in, but that are certainly important to the entire world right now. So can you just tell us a bit about yourself, maybe, and what you're up to these days? I think people will be very curious to hear that.
Yeah, thank you, David, and also thank you very much for inviting me to have this talk. And yeah, Kai Zenner, working for MEP Axel Voss in the European Parliament for the EPP group, so Conservative Party, and we are, as you said, heavily involved in the current AI Act negotiations. Actually, we are now since 2017 involved in the EU's attempt to regulate artificial
Mm,
intelligence. So also in most of the prep work, in so-called own initiative reports and so on, Axel and I were either leading or at least involved. And yeah, the AI Act was presented in 2001 in April, I think. And since then, this is basically our big file. And right now, the Parliament and the member states of the European Union have finalized their positions, and since 2 months now are negotiating with each other with the goal to reach an agreement at the end of the year.
mm,
And if we are successful, this would mean that the AI Act becomes law probably around May or June next year.
mm. Very interesting. I'm obviously a big fan of your work and follow everything that you're doing in over there in Brussels. But what does it feel like? You know, I traveled to different places in the world, most recently to Vegas and San Francisco, and people's favorite topic is EU regulation. So it seems like all the eyes are really sort of on you. What does it feel like, just from a personal experience, to be
Yeah.
part of this? I mean, this is to me, it feels like this is probably some of the most important work that is happening right now. It must be quite exciting to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'm yeah, for years now working nonstop without really longer breaks, I would say. But what keeps me going is that exactly like you're saying, you have this feeling, okay, this is first once in a lifetime personal moment. So very likely I will not have something similar in my professional life. And secondly, I truly believe that this is also, yeah, let's say for humankind, a really important moment in time where maybe we can talk about another general purpose technology like the steam engine, like
Mm,
printing, and so on and so on. So yeah, those 2 points combined. So I'm one time more in a personal level, one time really for us humans even. I think it's indeed a very, very special moment in time, which in the end always convinces me when I'm waking up in the morning and I'm still a bit tired to say, no, now I need to focus and I need to continue to, for example, negotiate, or now go to the airport and go to the conference, for example, the last days in Alpbach in Austria, where I was speaking at the panel and at the workshop, and try to bring the message across what we are trying to do in the European Union. So it's a really, I would say it's a privilege to be involved. I'm extremely happy and thankful.
I love that, and especially that sort of self-talk in the morning when getting up. I can totally see that. You know, Kai, when you came to the office a couple of months ago to visit Zurich and us, I think one of the interesting conversations we had was really around the progress of regulations and the progress of technology at the same time. So I remember personally that around 2017, I had some first serious encounters with the regulatory world, and uh, especially when it came to um, regulating AI technologies. Back then, we did some work in the aerospace sector. Um, people, things looked pretty, let's say, uh, slim in many ways. So, AI regulations weren't a real topic back then. I think the EU had maybe just come out with these guidelines around trustworthy AI, but it was pretty distant from regulations. And obviously, a lot of things have happened over the last couple of years, and we are now with that relatively concrete, EU AI Act that you just described as well. At the same time, there is this parallel world of AI technological progress and foundation models, and ChatGPT is sort of throwing everything up into the air. Um, can you maybe talk a bit about how the technological progress has really impacted sort of the policy making and the regulatory frameworks? And I know that you've also been involved with a new clause specifically for foundation models too. I would
Yeah,
love to get your perspective on that.
yeah. No, definitely. So, compared to when I started here in the European Parliament to work on artificial intelligence, now everyone is talking about it. In 2017, it was really a niche. So I felt very similar to yourself in those years. So, of course, there were a lot of AI experts, but you didn't see a lot of AI articles in the Financial Times or
Mm,
in Economist, and those two were probably the only bigger newspapers that were actually, at least from time to time, talking about AI. But it was not something that everyone was talking about, and even when this legislative term in the European Union started in 2019. AI was, well, it was at least one of the priorities and one of the topics, but back then everyone was talking about the Digital Market Act, Digital Services Act. So really this platform focus, talk about competition on the digital market, fake news, and so on and so on. So even then, after the European Commission and a lot of presidents, prime ministers, and so on underline more and more that the regulatory field really should focus also on AI, it was just one of many topics. And
mm,
this really changed with the topic that we talked also in Zurich about foundation models, general purpose AI systems. So as you know, those have been also around now for some years. You could maybe say since 2019 there is significant progress, but the real advances now were maybe last year, and definitely after the release of ChatGPT in November last year, 22, where let's say the broader public became aware of
mm,
the capabilities of the also threats by generative AI, general purpose systems, foundation models, whatever name you are choosing. And I would say since then, we are facing now a rather new surroundings or atmosphere here in Brussels, because again, we were just one of many digital fields, but now everyone talks about our files, the AI Act.
mm,
We are also facing a situation where in the European Parliament, not only 10, 20 parliamentarians feel like AI experts, but certainly almost every parliamentarian wants
mm.
to talk about AI. He or
Yeah,
she has an opinion on AI, which is not making it easier, because the more so-called experts or
right.
felt experts you have, the trickier it gets to find a common ground.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe if I can just jump in here, because I think one of the things that um I've certainly appreciated our conversations is that you seem to be really at the intersection of technology and regulations, and you seem to have a very deep understanding of the technological aspects, but also, of course, you're also very much involved in the activities in Brussels. When you go around and talk to these experts, or what are sort of the main concerns or risks that you hear about specifically tied to these foundation models? What has
Yeah.
changed in terms of like risks from like pre-GPT to now? We need to have a specific clause that treats
Yeah.
these models somewhat differently. What do you hear when you walk around in the office or outside?
You mean mostly in the parliament or outside the policy field?
Let's maybe stick to the parliament if that's anything
Yeah.
you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. So there I would first of all say we are all experts. So with brackets, we are definitely even on a technology or especially on a technical level, definitely not comparable to real machine learning, deep learning experts
Sure.
working in your firm, working at Apple, Google, whatsoever. So and this is the first point, the level of expertise is rather low. And as I said with my example, after the release of ChatGPT, we faced certainly a situation where a lot of parliamentarians felt, okay, we used a little bit ChatGPT, we read a few newspaper articles, now we know how we need to address it. And this is unfortunately, I think, a bad way of policy making because it's based on hype, on emotions,
Mm,
on feelings, and it's often the case if there is something new coming, something unexpected, then of course the media is talking a lot about it, and yeah, parliamentarians, we are all humans. The staffers like myself are humans, so often we are getting carried away. And yeah, to your question, when I'm now walking around in the parliament, I would say it's very similar to what is being discussed in the whole field of media. So there is a lot of talk about fake news,
mm,
artificially generated content, the upcoming elections, where many people are afraid of powerful cyber attacks driven by foundation models. Again, fake news, interferences, political advertisement by bad actors. Um, yeah, I would say this maybe in particular, and then depending on the political groups, also a lot of concerns with regards to competition matters. So that,
mm,
and this is one of the main drivers why the European Parliament created this new article focusing on foundation models, because we have really this fear that we are repeating certain problems again that occurred with, let's call it platform 1.0 times or issues, so that we have in the future a few digital gatekeepers or foundation model gatekeepers that are dominating the market, and every smaller market player is fully depending on a
mm,
few foundation models that then those smaller market players or other market players could just further refine or revise a little bit, but
mm,
they would need to buy it. And this is one thing that we really would like to prevent as Parliament. And this is why, for example, we invested so much time and effort in the open source community, because we feel that if the open source community is one of the key drivers in generative AI foundation models, not only on competition matters, also on transparency, accountability issues, and so on, maybe we would be able to solve
right,
certain threats.
right. And What you mentioned around sort of the policy making within a hype wave totally
Yeah,
resonates. I mean, certainly for me personally, on most days, it's also very hard to actually keep up with progress out there. Um, Now, I believe we certainly have a lot of good people around us that can also maybe distill some of these information for us. Um, but there's the hype, but I also get to speak to companies very regularly and see the pace of integration of
yeah,
these models into different use cases. And maybe on one end of the spectrum, we have financial institutions sort of using LLMs in foundation models in their applications. But we also, just recently spoke to a company that is making games available to hundreds of millions of children around the world. And obviously, there are very strong safety concerns around
yeah.
what these models can ultimately generate in terms of content for these children. So could you maybe briefly explain how this clause relates to the overall sort of AI Act? Is this like an appendix to it? Does it become like a part of the act, or is this now like a separate document? How do the
Yeah.
two relate to each other to maybe address some of these specific concerns
Yeah.
that come with foundation models?
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And again, also my political group, the EPP, is acknowledging that there are huge risks related to foundation models. So I would say it's like often you could do a lot of positive things with it. There's a lot of potential in it, but of course, everything or the more powerful one item or one technology becomes, the worse things can also be done with this
Right.
technology. So this is definitely fully understood by the parliament. And then again, besides the competition issue, this was one of the two key drivers for us to really revolutionize the AI Act. Why do I use this word? Because coming back to your question, this was really what we were doing, because the AI Act is um, normally, I would say, a typical product safety legislation law. So it's the term in Brussels is NLF, New Legislative Framework. If you look, for example, around, there is the toys regulation, a regulation that is putting on paper or in the law certain safety criteria if you are trying to place, as for example, the company Hasbro, a new toy on the European market. You need to fulfill, you need to choose the right suppliers, and so on and so on. And this is always how this product safety legislation is working. It's focusing on an item, a product with a fixed intended purpose. So, for
Mm.
example, let's take something completely different. This glass, the
Mhm.
intended purpose is I can put liquid in it and drink this liquid.
Yeah.
Um, this was already in the original AI Act a little bit changed, because on top of all those product safety legislation requirements, the Commission also um, added some fundamental rights protection, let's say ideas, concepts, and so on. Why did they do it? Because the Commission, and I would say there is a good argument to do it. The Commission was feeling that artificial intelligence is not the typical product or service,
Mm.
um, really challenging certain existing laws, principles, and could harm certain fundamental rights. For example, let's think about the employment area, where automated decision making could lead to biases and so on. So there you see something like with a glass, or it's something that is going much behind a fixed item or a hammer or something like this, and therefore maybe has an increased level of of harm or potential harm.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
now with foundation model, this was still not enough because again, also the AI Act was fixed on this idea that there is a concrete intended purpose. And as you know, a foundation model, I always compare it with a digital plasticine, so some gummy that you can still form and give a lot of different shapes. And therefore, we really needed to add a new layer in the AI Act for items or for models that are not yet um, narrow enough that they are falling under the product safety laws. And this we did with the new Article 28b, which is, to say it simple, an additional safety net, which is integrated in the AI Act to be capable on a conceptual level to deal with generative AI and foundation models. Sorry that it was so long, but yeah, it's a rather tricky topic that is
Right.
really an extremely unique thing to be done from a legislator so
Yeah.
far.
No, thank you for sharing that context. And I mean, what a time it is that, yeah, I've obviously been, somewhat involved, but for sure been following the developments over the last years, as it came to working out the content of the European AI Act. And right in the middle of that, you have this transformative technology um,
Yes.
come out, arguably out of another transformative sort of field, and shake things up so much. And I think you already alluded to some of the risks and also benefits, and obviously the big topic out there also AGI.
Yeah.
Um, how much do you think, or maybe how much do you see in practice, um, policymakers focusing on, let's say, the short-term risks and benefits that we may be seeing as I talk to companies all around the world now, integrating LLM products into their sort of organization versus the long-term risks and benefits of like the discussions we have around AGI.
Yeah.
What should be, do you have any thoughts on like, either personally or what you observe in terms of where the focus should be,
Yeah.
immediate concerns versus like longer term
Yeah.
AGI like risks?
Yeah. So let me start with an overview of how it's looking or perceived in the European Parliament, and then concluding with my personal perspective. So first, here it's really the same like on Twitter, in the research sector, in companies, and so on. So you have one group among the parliamentarians that is super scared, and from my side, it's a bit of hype. So they are really thinking, oh God, AGI is there already or is coming soon, and it's a major threat to humanity. And again, certain things that they are underlining are maybe really valid concerns that we maybe should consider. One example that I'm always doing, even though I'm not in this camp, is COVID. No one thought that something like COVID, or well, not many people thought that something like COVID could come so strongly and could have such severe effects on our society and our daily life. So maybe it's not wise to completely neglect this threat of or potential threat of AGI. The
Mm.
other camp, similar to what you can see on Twitter, is, however, saying, yeah, this is very, very, very far away or completely impossible. And therefore, let's not waste any time in those potential or unrealistic threats. Let's focus on what is happening now. So I'm always thinking about Emily Bender, for example, the researcher from the United States that is always underlining the point. And same here in the parliament, those people are for example, again, making references to this huge threat of fake news, deep
Mm.
fakes, of hidden biases, and so on. Let's say in the end, we with the AI Act definitely opted for the second camp, because the AI Act is really not the right mean to address AGI concerns, because it's just not fitting in a product safety legislation piece, and the AI Act is really focusing on the let's say what is happening right now. Personally, this is also why I think the parliament is probably the wrong location to address it, also with additional legislation, with let's say other legal means that are potentially possible. And if you really believe that AGI is something that we should carry about, then I think it's really international cooperation, more research, huge investments in guardrails, in certain safety mechanisms, and so on. So I would say again, I'm more in camp number 2, but I would not completely exclude the risk from camp number 1. But yeah, it's something that, in my opinion, you cannot address in a law, but you should more go with investments, international corporations, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Now, let me ask you very directly: are you personally worried about AGI?
No, no. I think maybe at the very beginning, when the hype was extremely strong at the beginning of this year, I think then, yeah, maybe I had some concerns that something could happen soon. But what was very helpful for me was to read all those research that came a little bit later, that was then, yeah, let's say, underlining that this first results that were presented by companies like OpenAI were maybe not that strong in reality. So we are still very far away. And right now, I think we have as humankind so many other problems to care about, and where we should concentrate on, that this is something that we should monitor. This I really believe in. So we should prepare, we should monitor, we should invest, and we should build up a lot of expertise. But in my opinion, it's not an immediate concern.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about the balance in discussions. I feel that sometimes sort of one puts a big shadow over the other camp, and we
Yes.
forget that there is something in between the status quo and the extinction that also
Exactly.
it's a lot of sort of net positive risks or benefits for that matter. Before we close this up, I just had one sort of final question. We already talked about sort of the global relevance of the work that you're doing, of course, for really sort of every company out there, probably a lot of individuals as well. There's also, I feel like, quite a bit of uncertainty in terms of like what is really going to happen when this EU AI Act comes into effect, when people have to show compliance, when companies have to show compliance. Now, is there like any sort of short form? I mean, I'm sure we can fill another sort of 45-minute conversation with this, but is there like a short form of like advice or like recommendations or like best practices that you would recommend for companies right now to sort of prepare for what's to come with the European AI Act? Say I was a company in the US, like what should I do today? Is there anything I should be doing today,
Yeah.
if at all?
Yeah. So I think right now, the best you can do is really monitor what is happening in Brussels, because the timetable is still not completely clear. we have until December a kind of deadline that we want to reach and come to a conclusion in our negotiations. But if we are successful, no one knows. If we are not successful, the whole AI Act will probably not come before 2026. You see, it's quite a lot, or 2025, let's say. If we are managing, then also there are transition period of maybe 2 years, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. Also, that is still in negotiations, meaning that companies still have time to prepare, to adjust their products, services, and so on. But nevertheless, even if you have now 2-3 years still to prepare, I know that especially with existing products, of course, every change needs a long time to prepare on a conceptual level, to, for example, also discuss with business partners and so on. So probably what is already good, on top of monitoring what is happening in Brussels, and with that knowing a little bit when the law will come to force, is that you engage in, first of all, trade associations, because trade associations are already preparing their members in how to become compliant, what aspects of the AI Act are in particular complicated, and so on and so on. And the even more important element of your make yourself ready for the AI Act strategy should be really involvement in international and national standardization organizations, because the AI Act is heavily depending on standards. Article 40 of the AI Act is giving you a presumption of conformity, so a rather easy means to become compliant with the AI Act if you are building a product that is based on the upcoming harmonized standards on AI. So no, they are still in development. No one knows how they are looking like, but this means now is the chance to really have a big influence. For example, if you are in the European Union in Senelec, our standardization body for the AI, and their companies can really make a change. What we see right now is that especially Microsoft, IBM, Huawei, and other non-European companies are very, very engaged, are very strong. It's their right. I would do the same. And they have a lot of expertise to share. But nevertheless, also smaller market players should engage, because they have maybe other experiences, maybe have also different knowledge, different expertise that would be extremely helpful to also include in those standards. So yeah, really answering to your questions, I think this would be the main strategy I would choose right now if I would be an AI company or a company with AI products.
Love that. So pretty much getting involved at this stage to not only
Yeah,
be a passive observer, but also shape things actively as we
definitely.
finalize some of these things.
Yes,
Thank you for sharing this, Kai. Certainly wish you the best of luck for what's to come. Again, I know you're incredibly busy and there's so much happening. Everyone is looking at what you're working on. So thank you for taking out the time to have this conversation, and I certainly look forward to more conversations that we will have both on things like AGI all the way to how we can make regulations happen here in Europe for the world.
sure. Thanks again for the invitation. And yeah, let's continue our conversation and happy to maybe repeat it in a few months again.
Perfect. Thank you.